Hey, it's Dan, and welcome to another episode of Smuggling Hope, where we seek to bring truth, freedom, and love, to whoever's listening, right? I want to make Catholic counsel available to the community. So we touch on a wide variety of topics on this show, everything from family life, mental health matters, cultural problems, parenting, you name it. Periodically, I have some wonderful guests on the show, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in and continuing to support the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how to convert your environment, right? To convert your environment so that it supports your goals, whether that is as a single person, as a married person, whether you are, living with roommates, whether you have a whole family, and really stealing a lot of the, tricks and tips from, believe it or not, a lot of the military and the research surrounding the formation of habits, because the military is the largest habit machine in the world. Because and we'll talk a little bit why that is, and how we as individuals, as husbands, wives, people, parents, business owners, whatnot, how we can take these patterns of habit formation and conversion of the environment to make our lives easier and help us to really hit our priorities, whether it's getting closer to our spouse, taking care of our health, working our business goals. And so I really want to try to break that down for you in the time we have today. So, because willpower doesn't work. That's actually a title of a book by Ben Hardy. Fantastic book, probably one of my favorite self-help-ish books. He's a fantastic researcher. Ben Hardy, willpower doesn't work. And if you want to look that up after the show, I'll put it in the show notes. I think it's a really useful book to pick up if you're a nerd like me. And if you're not a nerd like me, I don't know, date a nerd or something, or hopefully you're married to one. Or at least you got to put up with me for the next little bit of time here. So before we get into the show, we'll go through, the supports. And obviously, if you are listening and you want to continue to support the podcast, one of the best ways you can do that is by hitting the subscribe button, whether you're watching me on YouTube or whether you're watching or listening on Spotify or, the various platforms, iTunes. We want to continue to, make these programs better. And your support, your ability to subscribe, or if in part give us a review. I do read all of the reviews personally that people give to this program. If it's worthwhile of getting a 5-star rating, that's even better and more helpful, right? All of this tells the algorithm that this stuff is important, and it pushes it and promotes it, right? So if we want more and more people to have knowledge or access to this information, it's a great way to do just that. So thank you. Those that have really made an effort to support and continue to support this podcast are as follows. We've got people from the Mezzanine Creative. Mezzanine is a small business design firm, right? They will help you design your brand digitally, right? So great graphic artwork and design. And if you're looking at advertising for small businesses, check out Mezzanine Creative. They've designed and helped to develop our banner, right, for YouTube. Or if you like the banner on our the podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, those are all designed by the wonderful people at Mezzanine. So there's a link to them. All the sponsors and supports are down at the show notes. But if you go to mezzanine.co, you'll be able to access Mezzanine Creative and get in contact with the people over there. Also, this podcast is supported by Buffalo Chesterton Academy, right? So if you want to go to buffalochestertonacademy.org, you can check out what they have to offer your high school age students. So it is a Catholic, is a classical high school in the Catholic tradition. So it essentially, like, it is teaching the evolution of the freedom of Western thought to young people, and they learn how to think and how to behave and to develop their character, to develop their intellect, and to develop their spiritual understanding. And there's a big movement in the general nation, I guess, for more and more classical curriculum. So even the old traditional Catholic schools, it seems like they're starting to more and more frequently dump their curriculums for a classical approach. And why? It's because, obviously there's a whole wokeness kind of experience where it's this promotion of moral relativism in the schools and teaching, kids really either to compete with one another, which is just not the end all be all, but either to compete or to be a consumer, right? Or to compete at being a consumer, right? You're going to school for all this time so that you can make a lot of money, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful at life. And aside with that, for anybody concerned about success in life in psychological terminology has to do with living life with the least amount of regret. So at the Chesterton Academy, young people are learning how to live and operate in a world with actual wisdom. Wisdom is how you live. Knowledge is what you know, right? We want wisdom, and they have fantastic teachers and professors there. So check it out, buffingtonacademy.org. If you're looking for a Chesterton in your neck of the woods, look up at the show notes. You have a way to find and locate a Chesterton in your neck of the woods, or conspire with other people locally, maybe where you live, to come up with your own Chesterton Academy. The Chesterton Network is more than happy to help you out with that. So, and last but not least is the Hearts Renewed program. Hearts Renewed is an online marriage transformation program, and it is designed to help people overcome any barriers to having a remarkable marriage and to be able to do it all from the comfort of their own home. So all too often people are in need of couples counseling, but there's a lot of boundaries barriers to that. So there's a financial barrier, it costs too much, or they just don't have the time, or they can't find childcare, or they don't know who to trust. They don't want to take their problems to some weirdo. They don't want to talk to their priest, or the priest is too busy. And so for Catholic couples on the road to marriage, or Catholic couples that have been married for decades, and I've got people that are not necessarily even Catholic now that are doing this program to get closer to their spouse. And this program is designed so that you have constructive and dynamic conversations that help you to design the kind of marriage that you want. And really, it bypasses a lot of the pitfalls of most traditional approaches, because you're not going through all the negative crap, so to speak. You're not having to go down into the weeds with every negative event. The conversations are directed actually to the positive and to the future. And surprisingly, you will address all of your difficulties. Those do come up, but they do not come up in a negative way, which I think is super fascinating, how we can address negative aspects of relationships or hard things, but in a positive way. So everybody feels respected and loved, versus people don't want to come back. So whether you want to try the program for a week, right now you can try it for a week by just use the code RENEW, and you can try the whole program out for $1 for 7 days. And then if you find it helpful, awesome. And if for whatever reason, you want to keep it. Many couples, can finish the whole program in about 90 days. Some people, again, they do 1 or 2 exercises, and that changes their whole relationship, and they don't even finish the program, which is super cool. So check that out. Go to heartsrenewed.org. There's a lot of free resources on there, whether you're looking at sex and intimacy, or you're looking at parenting and family culture, or you just want to look at, or what is the best practices in marriage. We have a webinar on that. So check that out. That's free for the community. And if you know people whose marriages are struggling, let them know that this is an option. This whole program came from this idea that marriage is the cell of society. All of our kids, all of our families, our relationships all impact one another, even if we never meet. And we need to kind of really support marriage in the community. And there really hasn't been a lot, as I've seen in my field, is that we continue to produce we're always trying to create more consumers of mental health or behavioral services. And this program is designed really to, help people to start to become the therapeutic people in their lives and their communities and their families, and to pass this information to other people. It's far better, like, when people can access this information and change their family dynamics and their homes and marriages and cultures and whatnot, than constantly having to look out and access the gurus, right? So we'll ungurufy your marriage, if you want to check that out. So today, again, like I said, we're gonna go over how do we create an environment that produces the habits that will really help us to achieve our goals in our marriages, in our families, in our parenting, whatever the case might be. So again, like, it should be very helpful for people. So since this episode really highlights, the military, and I'm doing this. Well, probably it's going to be coming up after Veterans Day, but for anybody that is a veteran or knows a veteran, have them check out Hearts Renewed. They can try the whole program. I completely forgot about this, but you can try the whole program now for a month for free. Just type in the code veteran and you should be able to access that program for free. So we really want to support also our men and women who have served the country. Transition from those experiences is impossible to communicate to people outside of the military. So thank you to all of you who have served. If you want to check that out, again, if you know anybody you hear the podcast and maybe people would never listen to this, but maybe they do need help with their marriage, have them go to heartsrenew.org and type in the coupon code veteran, and they will get 30 days worth of the program for free. And again, I think that's a wonderful, I think that's hopefully a wonderful way to thank them for their service. So back to this whole idea. So today we're talking about the environment. So most people, there are two powers that we have as people. We have what we call a power of willpower, which is our power for choice, right? I choose to have a good breakfast. I choose to go to bed at a certain time. I choose to go to work. I choose to have, fish instead of a Big Mac, whatever it is. I can make good decisions. I can make bad decisions, but decisions themselves deplete our willpower. Now, neurologists will tell you that there is a whole variety of how we can extend that, and I've done podcasts on that. But the brain basically works on blood glucose. When you make a decision, your willpower muscle, so to speak, gets fatigued. Now, there are ways to make that extend. In this episode, I'm not talking about how to extend willpower or how to increase our ability to make choices. What I'm going to be focusing on is the second power, or the second capability of the person, which is to have a habit. So instead of relying on willpower, instead of relying on choice, we're doing things that don't require us to make a decision. These are habits. Habits are things that happen automatically with no effort. And, it's like when I chew my food, even though I may not chew it enough times, that is a habit. When I speak, oftentimes, and maybe I speak without thinking, that is a habit. I don't conscientiously think about all the words that are going to come out. I probably should. When people are walking, these are habits, right? We have habits of behavior. We have habits of linguistics and speech. We have habits of our everyday operations. We get up at a certain time. We go to bed at a certain time. We struggle with certain things, and we do it cyclically, right? These are habits. And so on this episode, I'm not going to be talking about breaking habits. What I'm going to be talking about is how to design your home or your home environment to essentially make it easier for you and your family or the people you live with to end up becoming kind of the people you want to be and achieving the goals that you want to achieve. So I'm going to use the example of family life, but you can use this, and I'll try to apply this to single people and people that are doing this in business as well, so that you understand that these things go across a variety of backgrounds. But this is a big thing for people, as they rely on willpower all the time. And realistically, we only have so much willpower in the course of a day. And like I said, that's a variable. Some people have more willpower a little bit, and some people have less willpower. Those of you who have chronic pain, I've had chronic pain on and off for most of my, at least half of my life now, that can consume your attention, right? So that makes it hard for you to make good decisions. If you're in a lot of pain, if you have a toothache, if you have chronic pain, if you're dealing with grief, all of these things can consume your attention, right? So it reduces your willpower. And so what we want to do is we want to rely on habit, but we want an environment that makes it easier. So I'll give you an example. Years ago, I met with a nun, and I had asked the nun, she was in a full habit, and she was, dressed out, had her 3-pound crucifix on, and her Birkenstocks or whatever it is. And I asked Sister how it was like to live in the convent, and Sister said, well, if we didn't have a divine spouse, meaning Jesus, who all the nuns are married to, if we didn't have a divine spouse, we would probably kill each other. And I kind of chuckled, and I said, well, what is it like to have to like really walk around? Do you ever, with these, with the, with the habit and the crucifix, like what's that like for you? I mean, because at the time I was visiting, it was very, very warm, and the habits are very, very, they look very heavy. I've never worn a full habit like that ever. And she said, well, having, having this large reminder, having this large crucifix on does make it much more easy to not curse at any, right? Which I thought was kind of fun. This whole idea that, like, again, you're wearing, Christ on a crucifix, you're covered in, this habit, which is all supposed to remind you that you're set aside for your spouse who is Christ. Well, I guess it makes it easier for you to show up as a holy person. And the saints, what you'll find is the saints were masters of converting the environment. They made it easier. That's why they do have habits. That's why, habits in the sense of, clothing. They made it easier, right? What they dress, when they eat, their routines, right? One of the largest studies on record when they studied brains was done, I think, in a Carmelite or Dominican convent where all these nuns donated their brains to science. And what they found was these women, even though they lived, some of them well past 90, that these women in the convent, their brains never developed plaques, right? Their brains never developed plaques that we would see for Alzheimer's. In part, I would say, is due to their diet, right? Because they were not eating a lot of processed foods and they were not using seed oils, right? And so I'm not going to go on and on about seed oils on this podcast. I'm not. I should bring my wife on to talk about seed oils, but seed oils obviously accelerate plaques in the brain for Alzheimer's, and there's a lot of research about that. But the other dimension is that the routine and the state of relaxation and the brain's ability to remain relaxed in rhythm and in routine allowed those women to really not age as quickly, to physically they don't. If you've ever seen a nun who's lived in a convent, she doesn't look her age. She always looks sometimes 20, sometimes 30 years younger, right? They're 65, but they look 40, right? And people are like, how is this? Well, I think, again, part of it is the diet and part of it is the rhythm, the environment, this environment that produces these holy habits. And so why can't we start to produce these habits of holiness and these habits of success in our homes? And that's what this podcast is really about. And so I want you to think about this, is that, again, like, we don't want to rely on willpower. We want to make things easier. So the first thing that I want you to do, and this is going to be a relatively simple thing, is to really think about what your goals are, right? And so you may want to write these down with your spouse or by yourself. Think about what your goals are, right? It could be that, and again, just pick one. So maybe your goal is, and it could be specific. It could maybe be that you want to be healthy, right? Maybe you and your spouse are trying to get healthier. Maybe you're trying to lose weight as an individual, whatever the case is, right? But I want to be healthy. Now, there are going to be things, the way that we're going to do this is a little different. And in the Hearts Renewed program, I go through this exercise in a variation of ways, but on the podcast, I will try to make it as simple as possible, so people can benefit from it. Is, if the goal is, to be healthy, then you want to remove yourself from the achievement of the goal just for a second, because we're not relying on you. We're going to try to use our willpower to alter the environment to make it easier for you to be healthy. So we have to think, well, what are the things in the environment that are already helping us in our goal of being healthy, right? And so we're going to write those things down again. So a thing in the environment might be, I have healthy food, or I might have vegetables in my house, or I have a cookbook in my house, or I have, it could be anything, right? It could be that you have a specific machine that processes things in a healthy way for you. It could be, that you have a lot of grass-fed beef, or you have a lot of fish, or it could be that you have a gym membership. These things are all things in the environment. They're not in you. So when I say environment, I don't want you to just think of just the physical environment so much as like the reality, right? But in the environment, I have a gym membership, right? I have clothes packed, maybe I've got gym clothes and they're packed in a bag. Those are all environmental things. So we want to write those things down, all of the things that are supportive of the goal. And then the second thing we want to do is we want to write down all of the things in the environment that are going to prohibit or inhibit the goal from being achieved. What are the things that are not helpful? So maybe in the environment, you have a lot of Halloween candy that's in the house. Maybe you have a spouse or a roommate that really likes to keep or eat junk food, or maybe there's just way too much alcohol in your house, and that's really a weak point for you to be healthy. And so maybe, but but these are things that are present, not absent. These are things that are present that stop you from achieving your goal in some regard, right? And they're in the environment. It's not you, right? But things that are, if you live really far away, maybe there's no gym, because you live in the country. Maybe the gym is an hour and a half away. Maybe there's no physical gym location for you to get to. So that's another thing, right? That's another thing that inhibits your health, right? So what are the things in the environment that prohibit you from achieving your goal, right? If we're talking about health. And then the third list, after you look at the first two, is what is it specifically that needs to be changed or altered to increase the probability that you will be able to succeed at your goal. And this should be something that is like a collaborative, right? So, maybe, I need to buy a gym membership, or maybe I need to throw out the Halloween candy. Or maybe I need to, get a weight set, right? Because I live in the country and there's no ability, or maybe I am like a stay-at-home mom and I don't have the ability to leave my children because my husband is at work. I'm going to have to work out at home. Or maybe I need to get a workout routine. Or maybe I have to learn about healthy meals. All of these things then give us at least something to actually move towards and to start to alter and change the environment. So think about it. It's a lot easier for me to be healthy if I have healthy foods in my home. If I don't have healthy foods in my home and all I have is a lot of really bad foods, right? Soda pop and, just pop, because I'm from Western New York. So all we've got is pop and, Miller High Life and, licorice and a bunch of like red dyes, processed food. I'm not going to pick on Stofers, but I will. And all of a sudden, this is all we're eating. Well, that's probably not the healthiest thing. And so that now I have to use willpower to resist this. If I have a bag of gummy bears in my pantry, right? Because I do like gummy bears. So if I have these and I'm not going to eat them, but I'm going to keep them because maybe there's going to be a party, maybe that at some point I'm going to do it for, like, if friends come over or something, I'm going to bust out the candy. What I have to do is I actually have to resist the environment. And that pulls on my willpower. So I'm not actually using my willpower effectively. I'm using my willpower to resist the environment. So people a lot of times, like, they end up burning through or burning up their willpower in weird ways because they're not thinking about how, they're not really thinking about how the environment's working against them, right? And so it's like when people will call me up and they'll be like, well, I really want to stop drinking alcohol, but they really haven't made any effort to remove it from their home. And so even though you're not drinking it and you feel commitment to not want to drink it right now, your mind is having to always, well, you got to go through the garage, you got to go through the fridge, you got to go through whatever, and you have to choose to not drink it. You have to go into the basement and just not, take the liquor off the shelf. You not drink the wine because your wife or your husband is keeping that for a party. Okay. Well, some people, if that's not a habit, if not drinking is not a habit, it's an actual effort. Eventually the environment wins, right? The environment will win, right? If I'm surrounded by unhealthy foods, the unhealthy foods will win unless I have a habit of eating healthy. Right? If the environment is very powerful, and people, I think a lot of times people just mitigate, or they pretend this isn't true, right? So we want to really be respectful of the environment, and we want to use our willpower. Again, simple message of this episode is we take the little pathetic amounts of willpower that we have, and we want to alter the environment little by little, so that every time we are in the environment supports the habits we want, right? So if I want to start to be healthy, or let's say, for instance, like I told my wife, maybe like a couple weeks back now, like really, I felt very convicted that I want to go more frequently to like daily mass. And that's hard for me. I don't really know why. That's my spiritual director's problem, but like to go more to daily mass. And if you listen to me on Instagram, you heard the story I told you about my son, but I'm not going to get into it on this. But Suffice to say is that to go out to daily mass, one of the best things I could do is to talk to my spouse about it, because she's a person in the environment that holds me accountable. So now to say this to my children, to say this to this other person, starts to change the environment. People who have said that they wanted to be healthy, or people who have said that they want to stop drinking or stop drugs or whatever it is, or whatever you're choosing to do, lose weight, when you make a public declaration for real, in all seriousness, it changes the environment, whether you mean it to or not, where people are now aware of your attitude and your interest, and they can support you. So my wife will support me with going to more frequently, to go to daily mass. I also don't want to look like a schmuck. So if I say this, I got to follow through on it. I want to make sure that I don't look like a fool. So even when I don't want to maybe go because it's hard, because it's early, or because I'm tired, I still push myself to go because I've said this. Now, the other things, we'll just use daily mass as an example, is this is not a habit. So I have to keep changing the environment. So what is super important? Well, for me to go to daily mass, I have to get up very early, earlier than maybe like I would prefer to. And I also have to surrender other things. There are certain things that I maybe can't do, or, I won't be able to poke around as much in the morning. I have to get up. I also have to go to bed early, right? So it starts to change the environment. Like when do I get reminded to go to bed earlier? Where am I going to go to church, right? Because that's an environmental thing. I had to get the schedule of where the churches are, because in the Diocese of Buffalo, which is continuingly, you know, ever weekly collapsing, right? We were losing our bearings as to when mass times are and when confession is and all this stuff. We have to have a grip on, well, when is it, available? So I have to kind of get all of these things together. And so again, with that, like, then we're going to, we have more of an environment that's going to support. My spouse supports it. I've got an idea of when the masses are. I've had to change my evening routine. So that stuff supports that achieved. Now, why, whether it's, again, exercise, or going to mass and spiritual things, the more that it's scheduled, the more I can repeat the behavior, right? So we want to think about that. The environment has to support us to repeat a behavior, because the more we can repeat a behavior, the easier that a non-habituated behavior becomes a habit. So for instance, if I go to mass once a week on Sunday, well, I repeat that process once, right? If I go to mass multiple times per week in the morning, now I've repeated that process 2, 3, 4 times. Now in the span of a month, instead of doing it 4 times, maybe I've done it 15 times, right? Or whatever the case might be, or 20 times. And so going to mass becomes a habit. And when things become a habit, we actually miss it when we don't do it, right? So that's the best assessment of when you've made a habit, is if you don't do it, do you miss it, right? So if you don't go to the gym, do you miss it? Well, if you don't miss it, it's not a habit. If you don't have a salad today, do you miss it? Well, if you miss it, it's a habit. It's a habit to eat greens or to eat vegetables or whatever it is. For some people, it's not a habit. I'm still trying to get my kids to eat vegetables. I don't know. So again, so if you're doing something and you can't get to it, you can't do it. That's how you can tell that a habit is essentially, if you're upset, that's how you know a habit's been formed. So again, we're really taking ourselves out of the equation in our families, in our personal lives, for making these things happen. We're instead trying to make it easier, trying to work on the environment, right? So for instance, like one of the most unmotivating behaviors that a person can engage in is really trying to exercise and eat healthy. Eating healthy is hard because pretty much all the foods that we consume in North America are so highly processed and added to, there's so many foods. There's so many chemicals that are put in to make you addicted to food. If you're not familiar with this, this is the reality. It's not something I made up. And no, Robert Kennedy's not insane. He's correct when he tells you that the food is poisoning you and making you addicted, right? That's why I think it's 75% of Americans are overweight. And that's not really great, right? So that's unmotivating to eat healthy, because we've been feeding this addiction for a while. And the other thing is to exercise is counterintuitive for the body system. The body is conservative. It doesn't want to expend energy. It doesn't want to go out and run 5 miles. I mean, you might want to run 5 miles. You might even feel good after you ran 5 miles, but the body sure as heck doesn't want to do it, because it's a risk to the body. It's going to take energy and get hurt, and it just doesn't have time for that. It's a lot easier to get a bag of chips and watch Gilmore Girls, or, go have a six-pack of beer, or whatever it is that people choose to do. And again, I'm using exercise as a thing because just to illustrate in another vein how the environment works. So let's say, for instance, that the environment we're trying to work out now, like we have two options for a gym, and you want to go to the gym, you want to make it a regular thing to go to the gym every couple days. Now, one gym is about, I don't know, 7 minutes away from your house, but it's in the opposite direction of your work. The other gym has a shower and it's 20 minutes away, but it's on the way, either on the way back from work or on the way to work. But either way, you always pass it. Of those two options, the one that's 5 minutes in the other direction is going to not be as helpful as the one that's en route, the thing that's already happening. I'm already going to work every day, so I'm always passing this gym. That's my gym. Why would I make this harder? I don't need to make this harder. I want to make this easier, right? If there's a church that you want to go to pray, or to go to mass, or to do adoration, or to reflect, go to the church that is on the way to your work, right? Or on the way back from your workplace, or find a route that takes you by that. What this is what we call, an activating trigger, right? So, what that means is that there's already something in the environment, and all we're doing is we're using that experience in the environment to trigger the behavior, the new habit that we want. And that's one of the easiest ways to produce new habits, is to use use the environment already. It's kind of like, if you're at home and you're like, oh, as a family, we really want to pray the rosary every day, and it's so hard because we have little kids, and maybe you won't. Maybe you won't pray a whole rosary. Maybe you pray a decade, or you're going to do some type of prayer every day with your family. Well, make sure that you have that activating trigger. So maybe it's after breakfast or after dinner. Like after dinner, that's the trigger, because we always eat dinner together. It's already in the environment. It's just that marks the next thing, which is after dinner, we all go into the other room and pray. That's just what we do. And that way it's a habit, right? But it's scheduled and it's deliberate until it's a habit. People come to expect that after dinner, this is what's going to happen. And so what we're doing is we're just tweaking the environment. We're figuring out what happens every day and what can we tack on this new behavior, right? What can we tack on the new habit? So it's super important, I think, for us as people. So again, the environment is of great support, and it really has a power to it. And I'll give you an example on airplanes, right? So airplanes are an interesting thing. Now, when they have smokers, right, people who are addicted to nicotine and tobacco, and they ask them about their urges and cravings to smoke, 75% of them do not experience urges or cravings to smoke when they are on an airplane. And the reason is the environment does not support the behavior. I know it sounds wild, but the environment does not support the behavior. They have no interest to smoke while they're on a plane. And I want you to think about that for a second, is when you're in an environment that supports your goal, right, you're going to behave a certain way. So think about this, not just in the sense of an airplane. Think about this in your home. In your home, what physically reminds you that you should treat each other with respect? I mean, you can go to Hobby Lobby and get all the signs you want: live, love, laugh, ha, 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 but again, does the stuff in your home, does it remind people to love each other? Does it condition people to want to be able to play together? Does it condition people to, want to be isolated, right? So one of the big things that I see a lot of times is, like, families have an environment that does not support family life, meaning that every kid has a phone or a TV in their room. When I moved to the house I live in, and I don't know if it was the people I purchased the home from or not, but my home has multiple rooms because I've got a lot of kids. But in every room, pretty much every room of this house, there was a television. And so I want you to think of it, but you don't even need to have a television because everybody has a phone now. So if everybody's on their phone, and kind of the environment is that everybody has their phone, well, nobody's in contact with each other. If you have a really big house, and then that might be what you need because maybe you have a lot of kids. But I want you to think of the bigger your house is, the less your family feels close because there's no reason for them to be together. They can go off into all their other little corners of the house and isolate. So the environment can work against us, right? Now, you may have a small house and a lot of kids, and those kids might want to kill each other, right? Because they're always on top of each other, but they're also forced to be together. So there's less ability to hide, and you have to work that environment differently because those kids have to know how to have boundaries and be kind too, right? So a bigger house, a smaller house is not the answer, but it is a factor in certain things that are going to happen, right? So the environment does have an effect. We respond to the environment, right? I think there was a genetic research. It's in that book I talked about in the beginning, in Ben Hardy's book from, I don't know, years ago. Maybe it's 12 years ago, maybe it's 15 years ago. So the research was done with stem cells, right? So stem cells are raw genetics, raw genetic material, and they can turn into anything, right? So these were not taken, from what I remember, these were not taken from an unborn child, but they were a stem cell research study from a healthy human adult. You can take stem cells from healthy humans, not just from unborn babies, even though Big Pharma doesn't like to talk about that. And so in this study with the adult stem cells, they had 4 petri dishes, right, where they had these raw material, and they could turn into anything, but they were all just raw stem cells. And so after 2 weeks, they came back to these 4 different petri dishes. And remember, these genetics, these stem cells were all the same. The first petri dish, second petri dish, third and fourth. Then after 2 weeks, they come back, and the first one turns into muscle tissue, right? They're muscle cells in the first one. Second one turns into bone cells. Third one turns into nervous cells. And I do believe like I can't recall like what the fourth one turned into, but they all were radically unique. And so from that research, again, this was done in the study of cancer. And again, I see if I can find the research off the top of my head, but I know that it is in that book about willpower not working. Is they realize that genetics are not expressed by themselves. Genetics are expressed through the environment. There's an environmental impact on genetics. So if you're in a very stressful environment, your genetics are going to reflect. You're going to have a certain effect. So we get sick more, we might have cancer. Again, like I'm not going to get into all the intricacies of this, but my point is the environment is a very powerful effect on people. And so you really want to study it. Does the clothes that I wear, my children wear, my spouse wear, does it convey the kind of experience that I want? If I want, my children to be respected, how should they dress? Because that is an environmental cue. You know what I mean? If your child is dressed and they're dressed very provocatively, or they're dressed and they're not dressed in a way that is respectful, in the sense that they're wearing really odd clothes that say very horrible things, or whatever it is, that conveys a certain type of attitude and a certain type of person. If you don't believe me, look at what is on people's bumper stickers, right? People's bumper stickers are essentially their environmental boundaries and warning signs. I mean, you pass somebody on the road, and their bumper sticker says "protected by Smith and Wesson." This guy has a gun or has friends that have a gun, but he's probably carrying a gun. If you pass somebody like with let's say like that on their bumper sticker, it says "Feel the burn," and it has like "No farms, no food." We know what this person is concerned about, right? And it doesn't make, I'm just saying we have an environment that is reflected out, and then the environment starts to affect what can happen. And if your environment doesn't match up with your goals, you have to move, you have to change it. Otherwise, you're going to burn out constantly as a parent, as an individual, on your goals, because you're constantly wasting your energy on constantly trying to remold the environment, right? So master it. What is it that supports the environment? What does not support the environment, and what is it specifically that can really support you in your goals that you can put into the environment, right? Because there's always things that can make it easier, and that's a word that people don't like. And I say it to people, and I feel like I have to say it over and over again because people don't understand this. Is life is hard enough. We do not have to make things even harder. we can look for ways to make our successes and chances at success easier. To have a habit is a lot easier than to always use willpower. And just because you're using willpower does not mean it's virtuous. Remember, when we use the word virtue, so virtue is your capacity, or we would call one of, the Greeks called it like the excellences. As Catholics or as Christians, virtue is really your movement to reflect God in the world, his goodness through your actions. But virtue, for something to be virtuous, it should be easy. It should not be hard, right? So if for whatever reason I'm in the office today and I walk by someone's cubicle and Sally leaves a $20 bill on her desk, and I walk by it and I think nothing about it, right? That $20 the bill is sitting there on the desk, and this coworker Vince walks by, Sally's desk, and he also doesn't take the $20 bill, but it bothers him. He has to resist the desire to pick up the $20 bill. It doesn't mean he's virtuous. It's not a habit. It's something he's having to struggle with still. Virtue becomes easy. So again, we want to have virtuous families, virtuous homes, virtuous lives. Then we have to produce an environment that is going to make it easier, so we can repeat these things over and over again. That's why it's so powerful when you marry your spouse. This is the person in the environment that really has to. They've got to have your back. And that's why, like, if you go and you check out the Hearts Renewed program, it shows people how to step by step use this, convert the environment, and work with your spouse, because this is one of the key parts of your environment outside of your children that are really going to either make or break things, right? They can help you be successful or not. So in that part, though, even if you don't have a spouse, you have people in your life, and they are parts of the environment. Your boss, your teachers, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your best friend. These people affect what can happen in your life. So, like, for instance, if I have a close friend and that close friend is being unfaithful to their spouse, and I don't even know about it, right? They don't even tell me. They're hiding the fact that they're cheating on their spouse from me. That's still going to negatively affect me, right? Even though I don't even know. But being around them, spending time with them, those attitudes, those statements, the resentment towards their spouse that they exhibit, showing me inappropriate things, saying inappropriate things about other women, whatever the case might be, that affects me, even though I don't even know about the infidelity. And so you got to realize this, right? And this is why I've told people on the podcast before, we talked about, romancing divorce, is, you if you're around people that are actively gone through divorce and you're struggling in your marriage, that is not the environment that's going to benefit you, because that environment cannot support your relationship, because that individual has that experience, and that person may not have the capacity at all to support you. They might, if they've healed from their divorce and they know why they went through the divorce and they love you and they still love your spouse, but if they're just negative Nancy who is telling you that divorce is the best thing that ever happened and you should be divorced too, well, that environment is going to destroy you. It's the same thing as if your best friend is 70 pounds overweight and plays video games all day. That person is not going to make you get to the physique that you want, right? Or if you're a woman and you want to continue to feel attractive and all of the women you're around are continuing to be frumpish, well, you're not going to really feel very attractive, right? And again, that environment affects the individuals, right? And it's the same thing with your kids. There was a video, I didn't get to see all of it, but it was an advertisement for the Chesterton schools, which I talked about in the beginning. And Dale Elquist, who is the founder of the Chesterton Network, in the school, in the video about the school, and I don't know if they're going to, at some point promote it, put it out, share it, and maybe you guys can get it online, is he says something that I think is profound. He says, this is like choosing your kid's high school is the most important decision you're going to make as a parent. And I thought that was a wild statement, but again, in line with what we talk about with the environment. If you go to a certain place, like that place is going to affect you in ways you don't even understand. The environment is a huge thing. They say that the research is, well, I should say research says that essentially my physical exercise, my health, but especially my physical desires and my wife's physical desires for health and exercise affects my children for 50 years of their life. It will have an impact for 50 years of my children's life. That's nuts, in my opinion. But I am the environment, right, for my kids. Your boss is the environment, right? If you're working with, a lot of people in business will say, well, people don't quit their jobs, they quit their boss, they quit their manager. And maybe that's true, but that's an environment. We want to make the environment work for us. And so again, obviously I'm not saying you should quit your job or leave your spouse, but I need you to understand that the environment is powerful. And you need to know the impact that the environment has on you reaching your goals. So again, little tweaks, right? So think about what your goal is. And the question that I ask people oftentimes, especially, is, well, what is the one thing that by doing it would make everything in your life easier or unnecessary? And that is really the goal, so to speak, to really simplify your life and to bring things under harmony so that if you choose a goal and you choose to change the environment, you make the environment so it's easier for you to achieve that goal, and that goal's achievement makes your life easier. Oftentimes people are addicted, just straight up addicted to complexity. They want more money, more cars, more positions of importance. They want to take fancy vacations, but all of this creates so much complexity. The big house, the extra house, the hunting house, or the hunting lodge you got, the ski house that you have, these trips planned, these cars that cost tons of money. It's complexity, right? And the complexity will remove you from what is important. It will remove you from the priorities. And so again, like this idea, is, well, what is the one thing that by doing it will make everything in my life easier or unnecessary? Right. And so that's a really important thing. If you can answer that and you want to get like what we call like a pretty big macro goal, like a big goal, it's the one thing that would make everything in my life easier or unnecessary is if maybe we had a plan for homeschooling, or we had, more income so I could be home more, whatever that is. Well, then that's going to be a goal that you're going to pursue. And then again, what is in the environment right now that supports that goal? What does not support that goal? And what do you need to do to start to make it easier to reach that goal, right? Maybe you're gonna have to come up with a schedule to start looking for other jobs, or, whatever the case might be. So don't get discouraged about this, and realize it's not like don't get perfectionistic about it. In the military, they have a thing called the commander's intent, and the commander's intent works where at the top of your orders there is the most important thing, the main priority, and then under it might be like multiple, dozens of other secondary, and tertiary things that need to be achieved in the span of a mission. But the most important thing is the commander's intent, right? Get all of these people over here to this hill. That needs to be done. So that's what we're focusing on. We need to have a commander's intent. We have to have an identified goal. Now, the thing that many people struggle with as I talk about this on this podcast is that they're trying to focus on too many things. If you do too many things, it's not sustainable. So that's the word, right? When you're with your spouse or you're by yourself and you're talking about these concepts, it has to be sustainable. Meaning, can I do this? How long can I do this for? Because if it's not something that I can commit to doing long term, it's probably not the right equation, right? So like I used the example of working out. Well, if I always pass that gym on the way home from work, that's more sustainable. Going to the gym every day, is that sustainable? In the beginning, definitely not, because it's not a habit. But now I've got some of the environment working for me, so now it's easier to get to the gym. And I've gone twice this week or 3 times this week. Gone to mass more, or we prayed the rosary as a family more, or I've started to work on my book, or I've started to, apply for that new job, or we've come up with a homeschool system that works, or whatever the deal is that you're doing, we want to make sure that it's sustainable. And again, you don't want to go and come up with multiple habits that you're starting and try to change everything all at once, because that's that's too much change for the mind, and then your brain loses interest, right? So again, key takeaways from this episode is number one, you want to figure out specifically, for yourself, you got to pick a goal. And hopefully that goal is something that makes your life easier. You do not want to make your life more difficult. You don't want to just get more money for money's sake. So remember, the rate of suicide actually goes up with income. I think people don't realize that. Maybe it's its own podcast. But yes, the rate of suicide goes up with income. The more money you make, the more at risk you are to kill yourself. That's for a whole lot of other reasons. But my point is, money is not it makes some things easier. It makes a lot of things way harder. And it's an accelerant. It has an ability to accelerate problems. So that's one thing. Okay. So get a goal that makes your life easier. Then think about all the things in the environment. Stop focusing on you. Stop saying, I'm lazy. Stop saying, like, I just don't have the willpower. That's not required right now. You got the same pathetic amount of willpower as everybody else. What in the environment supports your goal already? What in the environment does not support the goal right now? Right? What is hindering it? And the third thing is, what needs to happen to increase the probability that you can, meet that goal. But you need to take your time with those and then restructure things. Okay. And be aware of the fact that the environment is not just the physical home, although the home has a part of it, right? It's the clothes you purchase and wear. It's the people you surround yourself with. It's the ideas that you surround yourself with. It's how many TVs you're going to have in your home. It's the food in the house. It's it's all different types of things, right? So there's different forms of environmental factors. So make sure that you're moving towards an environment that supports. So convert the environment so the environment can convert you. I'll say that again. Convert the environment with your little bit of willpower so that environment can convert you and create better habits so that so it's easy. It's easy to do the right things. It's easy to be healthy. It's easy to be industrious with work. It's easier to homeschool your kids, or easier to be present with your spouse, or easier to pray as a family, or easier to do whatever it is. We do not have to make things harder. So hopefully this is a good place to end. Again, continue to do whatever you can to smuggle some hope wherever you can. Hopefully you can send this to people who are overwhelmed with the challenges, or maybe they keep beating themselves up and think it's all on them. But we want to kind of convert that environment. So get after that if you can. And again, if you know any veterans out there that want to try that program, to radically shift their marriage and everything, have them go over to Hearts Renewed and type in the code veteran. Please continue to give us your feedback online. All of your reviews online, I do read, and I do appreciate them. So you guys have a great rest of your week. And like I said, keep me in your prayers. I will be praying for you, and I will see you back next Wednesday.